So the doomers that you hear in the media are wrong. I actually believe that we have a bright geopolitical future as a world power, that is the United States. And I believe we have a rocky but solid economic future as well. So the first thing you have to realize is that we have, of course, three or maybe four international enemies that are problematic for us, meaning they can do us some kind of harm. I'm not really including North Korea on this because I consider North Korea to be a semi-proxy slash rogue state on its own. That would be a whole other discussion. I don't have the expertise to speak on it really. But your three adversaries, of course, are going to be China, they're going to be Russia, and Iran. The reason Iran makes the list is because Iran is a regional hegemon that is at variance with the United States. It's a natural regional hegemon for a lot of reasons, mainly geographic. The Iranian plateau is where you want to be. A large country, own it. It has its own industrial base, unlike most other countries that it's at loggerheads with. So, for instance, the Saudis don't make their own weapons, right? So Iran, for a very long time, has been resisting the United States asymmetrically. And one of the things that the critics of the Iraq War got correct was the outcome of the war being a Shia crescent of Iranian power, stretching from Syria to Iran itself through Iraq. And we, of course, saw recently the attack on the Saudi oil fields, which the Saudis were unable to resist. And Iran has had a wave of protests centering around, the morality police and oppressing women. There have been executions, and in other words, the Iranian government, the wet dream of the United States, since Iraq has been some kind of color revolution inside of Iran that would see the country change away from the Islamic Republic into something more amenable to international relations, less supporting of terrorism or asymmetric warfare against the United States. The Iran of today is not the Iran of the 80s that was bombing or attacking the U.S. directly. However, it still is opposing American interests. And you see a very rocky relationship with the Saudis, particularly over some issues with petrol and their trading policies with OPEC that might favor the Russians. Well, Iran had to backpedal, and its shadow government, which is the mullahs and the military, has been shown up and is likely at some point to be overthrown. Thus, for the United States, rendering the threat of a nuclear Iran pretty much irrelevant to us. It may still be relevant to Israel, but there was no native Persian tradition of anti-Semitism like there has been in other areas of that region. So I think that Iran, sooner or later, that's going to happen, and the Iranians will probably become a large trading partner with the regional struggle involving the Turks, and you can take them off the board as a adversary in that sense. Sunni terrorism, of course, not even something I would really want to discuss either, but you're going to continue to see, unfortunately, a generational struggle against Salafi Sunni terrorists. That's just going to be a thing. Now, China, I guess I'll talk about Russia last because there's more to talk about there with recent events. China has backed itself into a corner internationally where it's created such opposition that it cannot break out of the first island chain without military action. Cannot take over the South China Sea, right? Can't do any of those things. And depending on its rapprochement with India, it is going to have a naval and land power to its southwest that will be able to cut its trade entirely and oppose it in the Himalayas. So, and can oppose it as a nuclear power and an economic power. In kind of a contest for who gets to be the big dog in Asia. Of course, I think China has an edge there, but regardless. So I think that what just happened with China's COVID policy is going to see a different outcome than we expected. So that COVID policy, the zero COVID policy, they've had to back off of. And there are lots of protests in China, but Xi has been kind of discredited by that. And I think that has a lot of long-term implications for democratization or less authoritarian control in China itself. Of course, Russia is losing the Ukraine war or failing to achieve its objectives in any meaningful way. So what we'll probably see there is some kind of regime change, a continued rogue state status for Russia, essentially it's a rogue state, and eventually some kind of return to international normalcy, likely loss of its territorial gains in Ukraine. It's been discredited as a military power for a decade or two at least. Poses no threat to NATO, poses no threat to the United States, other than a strategic arsenal which they have tried to engage with us to reduce because they're spending too much money on it. So likely we're going to see a change there as well. So imagine a world with a less unfriendly array of these countries, and that's what you're going to get. And at that point, you can see increased international cooperation on a lot of issues we're facing, like climate change, increased trade, of course, particularly with Iran. And there's no reason to believe that the United States is some kind of perennial decline against these countries. That's a narrative that's fake. So it just never was something that was going to be real. We don't know how big the Chinese economy really even is, for instance. We know the Russian military was a Potemkin military that was basically fake. So things will be, things will be fine. I'll say that. Not going to be great, but they'll be better than people expect.